Hello, my name is Mrs. Gentle, and this is CP Chemistry. This website that I'm showing you is the site that I use for all my classes, and your students should be familiar with it. I'm just going to give you a tour, and it'll give you a little idea about my expectations for the year as well. I begin each class, beginning of the year, I begin talking to the students about why we study chemistry, and you can read the reasons. I have links here for many different resources that students might need when they are um, in school. And I also share a little bit about myself. So I will tell you, uh, I've been teaching since 2000, and I did take some time off when I had my children. My certification area is chemistry, but I've also taught conceptual physics, environmental science, forensics, consumer chemistry, and physical science. And I've taught in a lot of different places. I taught in New Haven. I taught at Trinity Catholic High School. I've taught at Stanford High. And of course, now I'm here at West Hill. And about a year and a half ago, I finished my master's in instructional technology. My passion is science. I love learning new things about the world. And my goal in class is not just teaching the subject, but also to inspire students to want to learn more about the world around them as well. My contact information is here. And the best email for me is my stanfordct.gov email address. And I do get back to you as quickly as I can. So anytime you have a concern, please send me an email and I will get back to you. So this website has everything about the class, about all my classes. So I'm going to go through that with you. Grading. Everyone always wants to know how they're going to get graded, and that's a good thing. It's nice to make sure you understand the expectations. We have two broad categories. One is summative assessments, and that's 60% of the student's grade. Summative assessments include things like unit tests and big projects, lab reports, some of the larger, more important quizzes. They really are to gauge how well students learned a content as we're starting to move on to a new topic. Um, Formative assessments, which is only 40% of the grade, that's the type of assignment that I'm using to help me gauge how well students are learning as we're learning. They help inform me so that I know what more I need to teach, what areas there are misconceptions or misunderstandings on. So formative assessments really are helpful more to me, also to students so they know what they're missing, what areas they need more help on as well. Tests and quizzes. Tests are important. They students have to know that there's a time when they have to perform, and that's what tests do. But there's other ways of assessing student learning, like projects, like lab reports, and I use those just as much. The key that I want students to understand, and of course I want uh, parents to understand as well, is that learning is a process, and sometimes you don't learn it at the same rate that I'm expecting you to, and you might need to take a makeup or make corrections on something. So I do offer makeup for tests and quizzes. I also, when I give feedback on even homework assignments, I allow students to make corrections there and resubmit it because I feel like students will learn more by doing that than if they just take a bad grade and say, oh, well. But if they go back and look at what their mistakes were and fix them, they learn more. So I offer that. Homework's pretty much every day, but sometimes they're very small assignments. They might be able to finish it in the last 10 minutes of class, or some are longer assignments and it might take them an hour or more after school. So every assignment is important, and every assignment should get done before they come back to class the next day. Um, and everything will also be posted on Google Classroom. I keep that up to date. Um, Lab reports. So we do lab activities a lot. Sometimes they're dry activities, and those are either paper or computer based labs. And sometimes they're wet labs, and that's where we actually use chemicals and we're using equipment in the classroom. It's very important that students are present for labs because sometimes if it is a wet lab, materials are perishable. We can't keep them around forever. So if they don't make it up in a certain amount of time, the materials aren't available anymore. And the other thing, students, I have them work in partners often. We can't right now, but we will be. And if you don't have a partner to work with, even if you're not sharing equipment, it makes labs more difficult. So it's always good to have someone to work with. And if they have to come after school, there's no guarantee that there's someone else that's making up the lab the same day. So why do we do labs? Well, one, they can see a certain science phenomenon happening right in front of them. So they get that experience, which is very important. But part of it is also being able to think critically about what they're seeing and come to a conclusion, and uh, and analyze their data to come to that conclusion. Those are skills that they're not going to use just in my classroom and then forget about. Those are skills that they will use in their life and help them to be successful in whatever they choose. So the labs are really where we get to practice those very important skills. When we write a full lab report, which we don't do very often because they are very intensive, it will include all of these topics. Most of the time, the lab report actually is just the end, collecting the data during lab, analyzing it, making a graph possibly, answering questions, and then coming to a conclusion. Typically, that's what students will have to do. And also very, very important is laboratory safety. We spent a first few days, almost a week, on laboratory safety. There's a funny video to watch if students or you want to. And then the basic rules are, wearing safety goggles, know what chemicals you're working with, don't fool around and follow directions. That's pretty basic. But if you ask your students, they'll be able to talk more extensively about laboratory safety. So this is chemistry. Here are the units that we study in chemistry. We right now we're working on our introduction to chemistry, and we'll be getting into matter and change and measurement. Then we move on to the atom. What is the atom made of? What's its structure? How is the structure of the nucleus involved with nuclear chemistry? And what about the outside of the atom where the electrons are, outside of the nucleus where the electrons are? And how those electrons influence the behavior of atoms, which leads right into the periodic table, learning about the periodic trends and how the structure of the atom impacts the periodic trends, how the structure of the atom impacts bonding, how atoms bond together and form compounds, and then how those compounds react with each other to have a chemical reaction, and how we write that chemical reaction as an equation. And then what's the math behind all that? That's what stoichiometry is. It's a very fancy word, but it's really talking about how to quantify, put numbers behind those chemical reactions that we just learned about. And then after that, we get into some more advanced topics, intermolecular forces, kinetic theory, states of matter, gas laws, solutions and solubility, and acids and bases. That's at the end of the year. We'll get there. So one last thing to point out, of course, is right here, again, is my email address. please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any concerns regarding what your student is doing or not doing in class. But I hope you have a great evening. I'm looking forward to a fantastic year with your students.